Denver Broncos general manager George Paton, he addressed Nathaniel Hackett and the team's 2-5 start. Not to mention, he reflected on the Russell Wilson trade. Would he still make it in hindsight, and did it make sense? Plus, what's up with all these trade rumors? George Paton shared his thoughts, and we react to all that and break it down with you, the avid listeners across Broncos country, on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day. Free and available everywhere you get your podcasts in audio format, or whether you watch us on YouTube. Do us a favor, hit the like button on the YouTube video, as well as comment for the algorithm so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. George Paton met with the media over the pond in London. We were surprised because I think we were anticipating we were going to hear from him during the bye week. We were anticipating there could be some changes made during the bye week. But he spoke, and he actually had a lot of support for Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett, and he's putting his support behind him, which, in the eyes of Broncos country, Sayre, you and I know, it's going to be a very, very risky thing, and I guarantee you we're probably going to have some people that are upset in the comment section down below. But we have to break down what George said about Nathaniel Hackett.
We do, Cody, because it's so important, the fact that, you got George Paton kind of coming out there, not just being a voice of reason, but kind of giving us the ability to step back for a second, maybe just kind of temper the expectations of what could happen, because there's been all these reports out there, right, about Nathaniel Hackett's job security and how he could join this really short list of head coaches throughout NFL history to be fired at, mid-season in their first year on the job. But this is what George Paton had to say. I think it's important just to listen to all the different facets of his quote, the different ways that he's still in support of Nathaniel Hackett. He said, and I got this quote on Twitter, Cody, from Mike Kliss, actually. So credit to Mike Kliss for this. But he said, "I believe in Nathaniel. I support Nathaniel 100%. He's been in this for 7 games as a head coach. The scrutiny he's faced is unprecedented. We've had 4 primetime games, so he's had to learn in front of the entire world. But I really like how he's kept this team together. They're connected. He's kept our building together. I appreciate how he came through that." Obviously, that's the end of the quote right there. But, Cody, I think obviously, given that he said that, the Broncos haven't quite come through it just yet. But you appreciate what Paton pointed out there, that Nathaniel Hackett, he's acknowledging he's learning, which means he's acknowledging there's been a struggle. At the same time, George Paton is not just going to move on after 7 games. He acknowledges it's only 7 games. He's going to be patient. And I think that's kind of the theme of everything that he said when he met with the media.
Well, now, even though he provides reassurance and support in Nathaniel Hackett, Sayre, does that change anything at this point when it comes to what we have been seeing on the offensive side of the ball? I'm going to say no. I still believe that even though George Paton believes in Nathaniel Hackett and supports him, I imagine a conversation will be had probably going into the bye week, and a lot of, probably still, regardless of how the game goes on Sunday against the Jaguars, that he should probably relinquish play-calling duties, to delegate that to somebody else so he can manage the team there and see if somebody else can get the offense rolling. And Clint Kubiak is the first guy that comes to mind. So part of me is wondering, too, and this is a question we'll post here on the podcast for everyone listening or anybody watching on YouTube, and make sure you share your comment down below with the response here. But with Nathaniel Hackett and how everything's going, with George Paton's comments here, if Hackett relinquished play-calling responsibilities, how might that change your perception of him? Would you be in support to letting the offense see if it could turn around with somebody else, with him as the head coach? and not the play caller? That's an interesting question to kind of pose there. But George Paton also addressed the team, despite the fact that, hey, the expectations for them, Sayre, were really high, and sadly they have not met that. And obviously sitting at 2-5, here's what Paton had to say. Obviously, thank you to our good friend Mike Kliss, who's provided these to us here. He says, obviously the results aren't there. Obviously not good enough. 2-5, and we all need to get better, and it starts with me. I do believe in this football team. I do believe in the people in our building, the coaching staff, that we can turn it around. And I tell you what, it's a bold proclamation considering how tough the Broncos schedule is about to get. We know how good the defense has been playing, but with all these trade rumors and everything along those lines there, I think a lot of people have questions. Can it turn around? And I think a majority of Broncos country that we've seen in our comment section are like, hey, the season's over. They can't turn it around. I still think that even though that they're at 2-5, and if they lose this weekend and drop to 2-6, there's still so much to play for, right? It's not necessarily you're not playing for the playoffs, but you're playing to also build with your cornerstone pieces that you have on your franchise. What are your thoughts on this?
Wouldn't it be funny, Cody, if the Broncos start off the season 3-5 or 2-6 or something like that, and they come out of the bye week and they just absolutely roll over everybody in the second half? I mean, that would be the ultimate just kind of shocker in terms of, isn't that kind of how this NFL season has gone though, right? Everything that we expected to happen. I mean, most of the things that we expected to happen, it's kind of been almost the opposite of that. But to me, Cody, I view George Paton and what he said here, I view it the same way. Like, you got to believe that you can turn it around, right? Because you got no choice but to believe anything else. And obviously he took blame himself. He said, it starts with me, right? That was part of the quote that you just shared. And I think that really George Paton, he's the guy that's put together this roster, but how much can he really control injuries? You know, how much can he really control? We didn't expect what we're seeing out of Russell Wilson and the offense. I think George Paton rather did his job in the offseason. I mean, he put together a really outstanding roster. The question now becomes, did he do enough, or did he make the right choices in hindsight? And how much does that affect how ownership views him? I think that's another topic for another day. But to me, Cody, George Paton, he made the right decisions. It just isn't working out quite yet. I don't think he made bad decisions that are now biting him in the butt. And we're seeing in hindsight, looking back and saying, I knew he made a mistake doing this, or I knew he made a mistake making this move. I think he pulled the right strings. Now we're seeing the team struggle. It's not good enough, like he said, but man, you got to believe that the team can get better. You got to believe that they can turn it around, because that's exactly what everyone in that building is thinking. Broncos country, we're the ones that really got to get on board, right? Broncos country's got to get on board with that same message, because it's them that's leaving the stadium early. It's them that's booing when the players are out on the field. And you have every right to express yourself, how you want to, if you're going to a game and paying the money to be there. But I think at this point, there's nothing else to do but believe that the team can turn it around, because that's what they have to do in London starting this weekend.
And I agree with your point that you made there too about what George Paton did in the offseason, the moves that he made, right? Because when he made those moves, everybody was like, yes, that was a fantastic move, George. But because they haven't been working out, we've seen people say, oh, this was a terrible move. There's no magic 8 ball in the NFL. I mean, this is wildly unpredictable. And as we've said a million times on this podcast, none of us had any inclination. Me being at training camp, me being at practice every day, watching the team, we had no inclination that this was going to be what we would see this season from Denver. So I think it's all about perspective. Obviously, George Paton coming out in support of Nathaniel Hackett, but he also came out in support of the decision to trade for Russell Wilson, despite Russell Wilson's struggles a little bit this season. Can Russell Wilson turn things around? If not this year, can he do it within the cycle in which George Paton has him locked up as a Denver Bronco? Not to mention, he shares why he got the contract extension done with Russell Wilson before the season even began. We'll dive into that coming up here in just a moment, but before we do that, let me tell you about SimpliSafe. And here's a sports analogy for you. When it comes to burglars, your home is like the end zone, and you need the absolute strongest defense that you can muster. This is why I use and trust SimpliSafe Home Security. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters, and it's cutting-edge technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back, so you always know that your home is safe. And with 24/7 professional monitoring, SimpliSafe's agents call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch police or first responders in an emergency, even if you're not home or you can't be reached. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, and smarter ways to detect motion that only alerts you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. And our monitoring experts use proprietary advanced response technology to visually confirm when a break-in is real so you can get the highest priority police dispatch. So customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnNFL. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Broncos general manager George Paton came out while the team was in London and addressed why he made the decision to extend Russell Wilson before the season began, and also reassured his support in the Broncos franchise quarterback. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Free and available everywhere you get your podcast in audio format, or whether you watch us on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. Make sure you hit that subscribe or that follow button. Make sure you also like the video on YouTube for the algorithm, and comment as well. Get in the discussion. We always love the feedback. We always love your insight as a Broncos fan as it pertains to the team that you root for every day on Sundays. Sayre, I mean, we talked about Nathaniel Hackett in the last segment, George Paton coming out and expressing his support over him and kind of coming out and being able to do that. I mean, when you meet with the media and you have these rumblings surrounding this team, of course he's going to be asked about anything and everything. One thing he was asked about was the trade for Russell Wilson, and not to mention just the contract extension in which we saw Russ get some big-time money. George Paton actually provided a really good insight into it that I think a lot of people aren't even thinking about as it stands right now, and that's because of how bad the offense has been.
Right, and I think George is absolutely spot on with his thoughts here on Russell Wilson, and of course he is. I mean, he's the guy in charge of building the Denver Broncos, right? So I think that kind of goes without saying, but I just want to say really quickly, Cody, that I think everybody needs to understand, we need to be reminded once again of our perspective. The thing that you mentioned in the first segment, everybody loved the Russell Wilson trade when it happened. I've never seen jerseys sell out on NFL Shop. Russell Wilson's jerseys for the Denver Broncos, they sold out. So everybody loved the trade. Everybody was on board with the trade. Nobody cared about the draft picks. Nobody was concerned about Russell Wilson at that time. And that's where George Paton is at right now. Once again, quotes from, I believe this is a combination of Mike Kliss and Eric DeLalla of DenverBroncos.com providing these quotes here. George Paton said of the Russell Wilson contract and the trade in general, I'm not concerned. We're in it for the long haul with Russ, not the first 7 games. You know, we believe in Russ. I believe in Russ. We know what Russ is capable of. It's our job to get the best out of Russ and our entire offense. I know we'll get there. You've seen the flashes with Russ. And I think that's exactly where we're at right now, Cody, right? We saw great things in the first week against Seattle, but what were we talking about at the end of that game? 2 fumbles at the 1-yard line. You know, we saw great things against the Raiders. We've seen great things against Houston even. It just hasn't quite been there consistently for 4 quarters. So right now with Russell Wilson, I think there is reason to be concerned about the offense. And with Russell Wilson specifically, I've had moments of serious concern about Russell Wilson. But I think looking at this thing as a whole, remembering what George Paton said, we're in it for the long haul. That's kind of where we're at right now, isn't it? You can't necessarily be concerned about individual games when you're in it with the long haul. As these things continue to pile up, however, we become more and more concerned about Russell Wilson. We become more and more concerned that has he fallen off a cliff, right? That's where everybody that I've been interacting with on Twitter has been at. They've been saying to me like they think Russell Wilson was showing signs of decline before this. And really, I don't know if there's evidence of that, Cody. I mean, before his finger injury last year, his QB rating was 125.3. When he came back, which very early from that finger injury, he had 2 bad games, and then he finished the season, the final 6 games of the year, his quarterback rating was over 103. So drop off, we would take that kind of drop off every single game, wouldn't we? If that's what the Broncos could get at QB. So is there reason to be concerned about Russell Wilson? I don't think so. Is there reason to be concerned about the offense? Sure, but that's being acknowledged here by George Paton.
And I'm glad that you brought that up. I think another thing that a lot of people were wondering is why did the Broncos extend Russell Wilson before he even played a down in Denver? And I think that's a valid question in the eyes of many people in Broncos country. George Paton was asked about that. And I think that his answer actually sheds a little bit of insight into some things that, things are going to change when we talk about the quarterback market here this offseason. Here's what he had to say about the contract. He said, we wanted to get ahead of the contract cycle. We had seen how Russ was in the offseason and training camp, and we felt really good about Russ. We wanted to get ahead of it. We didn't want a lot of distraction during the season, and we feel really good about it. I feel good about that deal. I feel like it will hold up. I feel good about Russ. And what he means by the upcoming quarterback market, Sayre, look at quarterbacks like Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson. You have some other quarterbacks, between Russ, like Russ got the extension, Kyler Murray got the extension, Rodgers got the extension this offseason. The next guys up, realistically, Herbert, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson might absolutely just destroy any kind of contract barrier that we've ever seen at the quarterback position. And not to mention Jalen Hurts is up there as well. So they wanted to get ahead of the curve here, and they wanted to get a contract extension because by the time these other contracts do get formulated, Sayre, Russell Wilson will not even be like one of the highest paid in the NFL. Those guys are going to take precedence. It probably will drop him into like the top 8, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's a good perspective to have, right? And it goes to your point. I'm not yet concerned about Russell Wilson. My biggest concern is that I don't think that this system suits what he does best, and we've seen that. We've seen them try to blend this hybrid offense, and Russ's side, in the games that you mentioned, where we've seen him move the ball, where we've seen him make these plays late in the fourth quarter against the 49ers, that's the Russell Wilson that we were accustomed to seeing, and I don't think Nathaniel Hackett's offense necessarily does that. So that's why we believe there needs to be a little bit of a change in play caller, and Nathaniel Hackett should just manage the team. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off there, Cody. I think that you're absolutely right. 100% spot on. And I didn't even think of some of the names that you brought up. Jalen Hurts is another guy that like a lot of people forget about when you're talking about this upcoming contract cycle at QB. You have to go into a season assuming the best about your guys, right? You can't just assume, well, he's going to go out there and have a complete dud of a season and we'll be able to get him cheap next year. Well, that's how you get really screwed over, right? When you're talking about contracts and getting guys for a decent price, you want to get in on the market early. We've seen that how many times now with George Paton. He's got in on the market early for the guys that he really wants to bring back, talking about those wide receivers last year specifically. But I think with the Russell Wilson thing, you do want to get ahead of it because next year, and Josh Allen, I don't know how many years he is into his deal, but I guarantee you he's going to be renegotiating that contract very soon. It's going to be one of those things where QBs pretty soon are going to be making $55 to $60 million a year on their new deals. And it wouldn't surprise me to see one of the guys that we've mentioned here making that kind of money, pushing $60 million per year on a new contract as the salary cap continues to increase, as the market continues to increase. So getting Russ for what is it, 40 something million, 45, 46 or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, Cody, but certainly that's where you want to be in terms of buying into the market early. An investment in a quarterback is the best investment that you can make. And I don't think that the Broncos made a mistake by re-signing Russell Wilson. Sure, you'd love to be able to see, is he going to be able to play at a high level? You'd love to be able to see that. That's where you get in trouble with things like this, being behind on the contract cycle and then having to pay way more and more into the future for a quarterback, whereas you could pay him now. I think George Paton made the right decision there as well.
I'm glad you and I get to sit and talk about this because it's almost like a therapy session, right? Where we're talking about everything, we're putting it up on the board. And, I think fans have even responded to, like, we maintain a level-headed, coverage of the team. Not everything is outrage, clickbait, bologna sandwich stuff that we see. This is a great moment, I think, despite the fact that, the team is frustrated, the fans are frustrated, and rightfully so. It's like, okay, how can we all come together to provide maybe some ideas and solutions that could make sense, that could keep the team, with the potential that they have on the right trajectory, but also fix some of the glaring issues that they have. That's how we approach the show here, Lockdown Broncos. And according, some of those issues as well that have been coming up with the rumors surrounding trades with Bradley Chubb, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Albert O, Dalton Risner, Melvin Gordon's names have all been thrown out in trade rumors. George Paton addressed that as well, and we'll see if he gives any inclination as to maybe what he may do before the trade deadline. But before we do that, now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. And it can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with a challenge in life. But when you learn how to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling, and a therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals no matter how big or how small. For the last 3.5 months, I've been using BetterHelp every single week. I do a therapy session once a week with my therapist. I filled out a form when I signed up. It matched me to a therapist, and from that point forward, I developed a really good connection. And if you don't develop a connection with your therapist and you need a new one, you can change therapists at any time. But the benefits that I have seen is I've been able to become a better problem solver, especially with my daily stress that I have with my schedule, with work, traveling, being on the road all the time. There's things that I need to take care of with myself, and BetterHelp has helped me achieve some of those solutions going forward. And if you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, it's accessible, it's affordable, and it's entirely online. And you get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey, and you can switch therapists anytime. And when you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, thank you so much, Broncos Country, for taking time out of your day to listen or to watch us break down all things Denver Broncos related on your favorite audio podcasting platform, or whether you watch on YouTube. We appreciate you so much, Broncos Country. Thank you for tuning in. Sayre, this is a George Paton special on today's episode of the show, just a couple of days before kickoff against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But the bigger question here, though, Sayre, that I think we have is how much of this is just GM speak, right? Because I don't think a GM is going to come out publicly and reveal his hand. And one thing I would say that we've learned about George Paton has a great poker face. He never reveals his hand. So how much of what we've heard is GM speak versus him just being open and honest? I think that's a really great question, but I think it's really applicable now when we talk about just being several days away from the NFL trade deadline. And he addressed trade rumors. There have been teams that have called. What did you get out of what George Paton had said to the media on Thursday?
Well, I think what George Paton is exceptional at in terms of the GM speak, like you mentioned, Cody, is really saying the truth without giving away what he wants to do or what he's going to do, right? So Exhibit A of this is when he talks about Bradley Chubb. So we've all heard and read the rumors. Even Bradley Chubb said he's heard the rumors about him potentially being traded. Things have gotten so far, actually, Cody, that I think Jordan Schultz had reported like any Bradley Chubb trade is going to come with a contract extension on the other side. So like if things have gotten that far behind the scenes, George Paton comes out and this is what he says about Bradley Chubb. We want to keep all of our core players, and he's one of our core players. Is there anything about what he said there that's not true, even if he still trades Bradley Chubb, right? So you could point back to that and say, well, that's a way for him to increase Bradley Chubb's trade value. Or if a trade doesn't actually end up happening, what has he now said about Bradley Chubb? He's a core player. We want to keep our core players. He's now put the message out there that the Broncos want to keep Bradley Chubb around. So to me, Cody, it's pretty much the perfect thing that you could say, right? It keeps Bradley Chubb at a high value because you're saying he's a core player, and it keeps things positive no matter what happens, right? If they trade him, well, they traded a core player. They're probably going to get great value for him. If they don't trade him, they kept a core player. They wanted to keep him all along. So it's kind of just funny how these things play out in terms of the media, but obviously acknowledging the rumors are out there. And he said even that he's received calls on some players.
Well, and that's the thing too, right? Because teams are going to pick up the phone. And with the Broncos being at 2-5, you and I have addressed this. We've talked about this. The fact that the Broncos have a losing record, everybody thinks that there's a fire sale going on, right? And I would even say like this mindset has trickled down to the fan base. And this is where I just want to say, hey, timeout. Like I will call a timeout. I'm not going to pull the Nathaniel Hackett. I'm going to call the timeout here. I'm going to say, Broncos Country, hold up for a minute. Here's some logic on the situation, because I think we get so far caught up in just the whirlwind. We go down the rabbit hole of emotions sometimes, and it's understandable. But I think it makes us lose sight on the bigger picture here. Now, when it comes to the Broncos, Sayre, I think everybody's confusing this 2-5 start. I think everyone's confusing and lumping how the offense is performing with the defense and with special teams. Defense has been playing phenomenal. And they've been doing it with key injuries to key guys as well. That's even more impressive there. Special teams has been absolutely improved, minus the kicking game having some inconsistencies from Brandon McManus so far here. He's good from 40 to 46, don't get me wrong. But when it's 50 and more, it's like, hey, why even try it? Why even say that you're good from this area? Outside of that, I look at this offense, Sayre, okay, and I think you and I are in agreement. The biggest issue is the scheme. This scheme is not fitting to the strengths of the players. There's that. The offensive line has not been as good as people have wanted it to be. And granted, when you have, key guys injured, you don't have your perennial left tackle, that does impact things. I do think that there need to be changes made. And look, Lloyd Cushenberry has really, really, really struggled this season. And I like Lloyd Cushenberry a lot, but he just gets out-physicaled by opposing defenders, and the Broncos need a real solidified anchor at the center position. Could that be Luke Wattenberg, who the Broncos drafted? Possibly, right? But, that's a huge unguaranteed. You can't throw him in right now and say, okay, maybe you could, because the Broncos are 2-5. They could be 2-6. You could maybe throw Luke Wattenberg in there and see what he has the rest of the way. But outside of that, you have questions at the right tackle position. You don't have questions about right guard because you know that Quinn Miners is that guy. So you have solidarity at left tackle. You have solidarity at the right guard position. But realistically, the outlook and the long-term prospects of left guard, center, and right tackle really are the team's biggest glaring needs. Not to mention the offensive line coach. I don't believe that Butch Berry is meshing well with what the Broncos need and what these guys need in terms of their skill sets. So for me, there are some huge questions, and I really think that the Broncos' biggest issue, the biggest holes on the offensive side of the ball, they are at the offensive line position, which can be addressed in free agency. And my personal belief is everyone's like, get the draft picks back. But I don't believe that you're going to go out there, you're going to draft a rookie or 2 rookies or maybe even 3 rookies for the offensive line that are going to come in and make a difference, especially when you have a quarterback like Russell Wilson. To me, Denver can address that in free agency, and I firmly believe that they will.
I think so too. I really do. And I think even as we look at this NFL trade deadline, if you're not accumulating picks, maybe some of these players that you want to trade or that you intend to trade, maybe you could flop them or flip them or whatever you want to call it for some of these offensive linemen that are potentially available out there that could maybe help you in the short term. Like I've read former first-round pick Andre Dillard is available. Former first-round pick Isaiah Wynn could be available with the Patriots. So, there's a few names out there that you just kind of look at and you say, okay, could a change of scenery maybe boost this guy? And then at the end of the season, you say, hey, this guy played really well for us. We're going to re-sign him. Those are the kind of trades that I would make. And I know anytime I suggest a trade on Twitter or anywhere else, Cody, I get comments from people saying, the Broncos can't be trading any draft picks. And the thing that's in vogue right now, however you say it, in the NFL is pick swapping when you're trading for players that are on the block. The Broncos have already done this multiple times. Yep, you send a pick and you get back. Yeah, Malik Reed, exactly. You send a pick, you get a player and a pick back. So it's not like a net loss in terms of the number of picks. You may be moving down around, separated by a year, but you're keeping the same total number of picks. To me, Cody, this is where George Paton is going to really be able to improve his roster here. Although the Broncos do have a high waiver wire placement as well at this point, which is kind of sad to think about. But I think that's where you could really address some of those issues like you're talking about there via trade. Maybe bring some guys in via these late round pick swaps. Maybe look into, teams are willing to deal 2024 picks, 2025 picks. Teams don't care right now. They're willing to do these late round pick swaps in future years to get players off their salary cap, to get players off the books, to get players into new opportunities. It's basically like a free agency, or we see these kinds of things happen a lot of times in the MLB, different ways that you can acquire players with basically draft picks that you just don't care about at this point. So I'm not saying the Broncos go out there and address the needs like you mentioned on the offensive line with their 3rd round picks that they have remaining. I'm saying go out there, see if you can get a guy for a late round pick swap in this year or a future year, and try to upgrade your roster right now, because Nathaniel Hackett needs to get it right. George Paton said it, right? That's where the offense is at right now. They need to turn things around. They need to get things figured out. And he said it starts with me. So if it starts with him, you got to go out there and improve your roster any way that you possibly can. Potentially some of these buy low trades are ways to do it. I know George Paton has not necessarily been a reclamation project kind of guy up to this point, but maybe, just maybe maybe one or two of these guys could be just like Kenny Young we saw last year. He came in, contributed very high level for the Broncos. Stephen Weatherly, remember that? The Broncos needed some depth, and he provided it off the edge. Why would you not try something like this on the offensive line? Why would you not try something like this at cornerback? I just feel, Cody, like the Broncos could definitely acquire some players with late round pick swaps that wouldn't affect their overall draft capital, stash, or, the war chest, as you've called it before. I think they need to go out there and they need to consider some of these things ASAP.
Some good suggestions here, courtesy of Sayre, Bedinger, and Broncos Country. Let us know what you think down below in the YouTube comments section. How are you feeling after George Paton's comments around Nathaniel Hackett's status, trade rumors, and Russell Wilson, the contract and the trade in general? Let us know down below if you're watching on YouTube. Don't forget, hit that like button on the YouTube video so it helps us push this out to more members of Broncos Country. We appreciate you so much. Sayre, Bedinger, and myself will be back next time for a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, the post-game report breaking down the Broncos game on Sunday, early 7:30 a.m. Mountain Time kickoff overseas in London. We have you covered with the Locked On Broncos post-game report. We'll see you then.